Were you ever on a long trip and you needed to take a break? So you decided to find a place to put your head down for the night, but you didn't think you were going to die. In this episode, we take a look at the Bloody Benders.
Ladies and gentlemen of all ages, boys and girls, thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of Angry Meat Production. We appreciate you coming in and letting us be a part of your lives week in and week out. We hope to do our best to present you with something that your eardrums delight in. Whether you're looking at us on YouTube or Rumble, or listening to us on Spotify, Google, or Anchor, or any of the other podcast services that we are currently on or trying to get on. We thank you. And if you don't mind, at the end of every episode, stop by, leave us a comment, leave us a like. If it asks for 5 stars, we'll take 5 stars, even if you don't like us. 5 stars are what it's all about. With that being said, we hope you enjoy our attempt to make our advocation our vocation. Ladies and gentlemen, let the games begin.
Welcome, Angry Faithful. Today on Psychos and Sociopaths, we're going to go over the Bloody Benders. Now, first off, I was thinking, Benders from Futurama. I don't know why. Bender. But anyways, yeah, going over these guys. Just a little headway. Check out Psychos and Sociopath. Was it Peter Kempler? Let me look at this stuff up. I should have had this up because it's actually quite hilarious. Just a backlog and checking out the past stuff. I'm looking at Peter Curtin, and he wants me to delete the video about him. Wants me to stop. It's spam. Blah blah blah. Anyways, yeah, Peter Kirkland died in 1941, I think it is. Anyways, it's been a couple of minutes to actually look at that, but he's telling me to stop, which I'm not gonna do. I'm on like Spotify and all kinds of stuff. So if the YouTube channel doesn't show up for you guys, check us out on Spotify and Rumble, and sometimes we put the videos on Twitter. But anyways, I'm sorry, I'm just so giddy about this. I could have gone so ham. I could have gone ham on this, on the comments, but I didn't. Everybody like pulled the reins off of the Dave wordsmithing. And yeah, I love it. I love it. Leave comments like that. I don't care. It's awesome. I love every one of them that spokes a little spark and gets us out there in the world, and a lot of people wondering why. And another note, why so serious? But anyways, let's get back to the Bloody Benders. Bloody Benders, this is the background of it. In October 1870, 5 families of Spiritual Homestead in and around the township of Osage in northwestern Labette County, approximately 7 miles or 11 kilometers northeast where Chevelle was established 7 months later. One of these families was John Bender and John Bender Jr., who registered 160 acres of land located adjacent to the Great Osage Trail. And the Osage Trail was also known as the Oso Trace, the Koala Trace. And yes, if you hear thunder, that's because we're on a thunderstorm watch. but was one of the more well-known Native American trails throughout the countryside of which are now today it's called the Midwest and Plains states of the United States. So, the only open road for traveling far west, which they built a cabin, a barn with a corral, and a well were built. Elvira Bender. Oh, that's. I wonder if Elvira Mistress of the Night. That's where she got her name. That would be kind of cool. Just a little background reference. And her daughter Kate arrived in fall 1871. The Benders divided their cabinet into two rooms with a canvas wagon cover. They used the smaller room as a rear for living quarters and the front room as a general store where they sold dry goods. And back then, there was a lot of dry goods for when you actually go on the trail and whatnot. Dry goods lasted a lot longer than regular goods. Sometimes they drove cattle with them so they could chop up the cow and have like a nice meal. If you take a look at 1883 movie, that's pretty much how a wagon train happened. Yeah, it's pretty much like down to the letter. It had a lot of dramatizations and everything, but check it out. It's actually a good show. I love it. Anyways, the front section also contained a kitchen and a dining table where travelers could stop for a meal and spend the night. Elvira and Kate also planted 2 acres of vegetable gardens and an apple orchard north of the cabin. Now let's get down to the Bender family. John Bender Sr. was around 60 years old and spoke little English. The English that he did speak was guttural. Speech sound of are those with a primal place in agricultural near the back of or I guess he grunted a lot of his stuff. And usually intelligible. According to May 23rd, 1873, in addition of Emporia News, he was identified with the name William Bender. Elvira Bender was 55 years old, and she allegedly spoke little English and also unfriendly that her neighbors called her the she-devil. Well, this is German descent. John Bender Jr. was approximately around 25 years old, handsome and auburn hair and mustache. He spoke English fluently with a German accent. He was prone to laughing aimlessly, and which led many to consider half-wit. That's kind of funny. That you just laugh. That just reminds me of the Joker movie where he couldn't stop and he had to have that card. It was like, I'm not laughing. I just have a compulsion. Kate Bender, who was around 23, was communicative and attractive and spoke English well with little accent. She's self-proclaimed healer and psychic. She distributed flyers that advertising her supernatural powers and her ability to cure illness. Yeah, back then it's so much funnier than the doctors we have nowadays. Doctors, they do research, stuff like that. Back then, I mean, they would chop off your leg if they couldn't figure out how to fix it, or they get like the Million Dies to the West. It was kind of like spot on. It's like, hey, oh, you got a headache? Let's put a nail in it. That kind of stuff. She would conduct seances, give lectures on spirituality, for which she gained notoriety and advocated free love. Kate's popularity became largely attraction for the Bender's Inn. Although the elder Benders kept to themselves, Kate and her brother regularly attended Sunday school in nearby Harmony Grove. The Benders were widely believed to be German immigrants. No documentation or proof of this relationship to the German land, or where they were born has ever been found. John Bender Sr. was from either Germany, Norway, or the Netherlands, and may have been born John Flinker. Let's get the old Stephen Hawking out and find out if that's actually how you
Flickinger.
Flickinger. According to Contemporary newspaper, Elvira was born in Auburn Hill, Mark, often reported as Mech. In the, I am gonna butcher that first name. It's some kind of mountain.
Adirondack.
Adirondack Mountains. These mountains are northeastern New York, with boundaries that correspond roughly to those of the Adirondack Park. They cover about 5,000 square miles. The mountains form a roughly circular dome. She married Simon Mark, with whom she became. She claimed to have 12 children back then. God, they would pop kids out like Pets dispensers. Later, she married William Stephen Griffin. Elvira was rumored to have murdered several husbands, but none of those rumors have ever been proven. Kate was properly Elvira's fifth daughter. Some of Bender's neighbors claimed that John and Kate were not brothers and sisters, but husband and wife. That is kind of weird. Complimentary description for those who sorry. For those who knew them and had written about the Benders, the old man was a repulsive, hideous brute without a redeeming trait, dirty, profane, and ill-tempered. Old Miss Benders was a dirty old Dutch crone. Her face was the fit picture of the midnight hag who that drove the spell mysterious abundance about the soul of Macbeth. Jesus, they did not pull any punches on these guys. Younger Bender was seen well excited, recalled the gray robbering hyena at once to mine. Jesus. Kate proclaimed herself responsible to no one save herself. She performed to be a medium of spiritualism and delivered lectures on that subject. In her lecture, she publicly declared that murder might be a direction for good, that in what the world might deem villainy. Her soul might have been read bravely, noble, and humanity. She advocated free love and denounced also the societal regulations for the promotion of purity and preservation of chivalry, which she called miserable requirements for self-continued society. She maintained cardinal relations with her brother and boldly proclaimed her right to do so in the following words found in her lecture manuscript. Shall we confine ourselves to a single love or deny our natures their proper ways? Even though it be a brother's passion for his own sister, I say it should not be smothered. Jesus. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay. So they were into, again, they don't know if they were husband and wife or not, but that would actually come up with speculation that they weren't really siblings, but they probably were siblings back then. People practice incest. Today, I even trying to say it, incest, kind of little throw up hits back in my throat. Anyways, let's begin. More down. In May 1871, the body of a man named Jones was discovered in Drum Creek with his cut throat and crushed skull. The owners of Drums Creek claimed was suspect, but no action was taken. In February 1872, the bodies of two men were found with the same injuries as Jones. By 1873, reports of missing people who had passed through the area had become so common that travelers began to avoid the trail altogether. The area was already widely known as horse thieves and villainy. Vigilance committees often arrested some for the disappearances. Only for them to be later released by authorities. Many innocent men under suspicion were ran out of the county by these committees. Their downfall. In the winter of 1872, George Newton Longcore left Independence, Kansas, with his infant daughter, Mary Ann, and resettled in Iowa. They were never seen again. In the spring of 1873, Longcore's former neighbor, Dr. William Henry York, went looking for them, questioning homesteaders along the trail. York reached Fort Scott and March 9th began to return journey to Independence, but never arrived. York had two brothers, Ed York living in Fort Scott and Colonel Alexander M. York, a Civil War veteran, lawyer, and member of Kansas State Senate for Independence. Both knew Williams' travels plans and, when he failed to return, began an all-out search for the missing doctor. Colonel York led a company of some 50 men, questioning every traveler along the trail and visited all areas of the homestead. On March 28th, 1873, Colonel York arrived at the Bender's Inn with a Mr. Johnson, explaining that his brother has gone missing, asking if they have seen him. They admitted Dr. York had stayed with them and suggested that the possibility he ran into troubles with the Indians. Colonel York agreed that this was possibly and remained for dinner. On April 3rd, Colonel York returned to the inn and with armed men after learning that a woman had fled the inn after Elvira Bender had threatened her with knives. Elvira alleged that could not understand English, while the younger Benders denied the claim. When York repeated the claim, Elvira became enraged, saying the woman was a witch who had cursed her coffee and ordered the men to leave her house, revealing for the first time that her sense of English language was much better than was let on. Before York left, Kate asked him to return alone the following Friday night, and she would use her clairvoyancy ability to help him find his brother. I'm a psychic. I know what I'm talking about. I will help you find your brother. That's basically what happened. It's probably a woman voice, but that's probably what happened. The men with York were convinced that the Benders and the neighboring family, the Roaches, were guilty and wanted to hang them all. But York insisted that evidence must be found. So clearer heads prevailed. Around the same time, neighboring communities began to accusations. That the Osage community was responsible for the disappearance, and the Osage Township arranged a meeting with Harmony Grove Schoolhouse. 75 locals attended the meeting, including Colonel York and both John Bender and John Bender Jr. After discussing the disappearance, including that of William York. They agreed to obtain a warrant and search every homestead between Big Hill Creek and Drum Creek. Despite York's strong suspicions regarding the Benders since he visited several weeks earlier, no one had watched them. Sorry. It was not noticeable for several days that they had fled. 3 days after the township meeting, Billy Toll was driving cattle past the Benders' property when he noticed that the inn was abandoned and the farm animals were unfed. Toll reported the fact to the township's trustees, but due to the inclement weather, several days lapsed before the abandonment could be investigated. The township trustees called for volunteers, and several hundred turned out to form a search party that included Colonel York. When the party arrived at the inn, they found the cabin empty of food, clothing, and personal possessions. A bad odor was noticed, and a trace of trap door underneath a bed nailed shut. After opening the trap door, the party found clotted blood on the floor of the empty room underneath, 6 foot deep and 7 foot square at the top by 3 feet squared at the bottom. They broke up the stone slab floor and with the sledgehammer and found no bodies, determining that the smell was from the blood that had soaked into the soil. The men physically lifted the cabin and removed it to the side to dig under it, but no bodies were found. They then probed the ground around the cabin with the metal rod, especially in a disturbed soil for the vegetable garden and orchard, where Dr. York's body was found later that evening. Buried face down with his feet barely below the surface, the prodding continued until the midnight. With another 9 suspect grave sites marked before the men were satisfied they had found all and retired for the night. And the next morning, another 8 bodies were found in 7 of the 9 suspected graves. While one of the found in the well, along with several body parts, all but one had their head bashed in with a hammer and throat cut. Newspaper reported that all were indecently mutilated. The body of a young girl was found with no injuries sufficient to cause. It was wordsmith. I'm having a hard problem with that. It was speculated that she had been strangled and buried alive. The Kansas newspaper reported that the crowd was so incensed after finding the bodies that a friend of the Benders named Brockman, who was among the onlookers, was hanged from a beam in the inn until unconscious, revived, interrogated, and hanged again. Jesus! After the third hanging, they released him, and he staggered home as one of who was drunken and deranged. A Roman Catholic prayer book was found in the house, with notes inside written in German, which were later translated to the text of John Bender, born July 30th, 1848, and John Gibraltar came to America on July 1st, 18 question mark. Big Slaughter Day, Jan 8th, and Hell Departed was in the Bible. Word of the murders spread quickly, and more than 3,000 people, including reports from as far as New York City and Chicago, visited the site. The Bender's cabin was destroyed by surveyor hunters who took everything, including the brick that lined the cellar and the stone lined with walls. Now, this happened back then. Even if you look back at our Bonnie and Clyde, when a murderer or something like that was killed, someone that was like in the newspaper a lot, we'll call him infamous instead of a celebrity or famous. They'll take like fingers, ears, all kinds of stuff to remember. It's like, hey, I have the finger of Bonnie, or I have the finger of Clyde. That type of stuff that happened regularly. People wanted remembrance of that, even the horror of what would happen. State Senator Alexander York offered $1,000, which nowadays would be 24,428 as of 2023 reward for the family's arrest. On May 17th, Kansas Governor Thomas Osborne offered $2,000, which is roughly 48,856 reward for the apprehension of all 4. In its conjunction, that was a guest stay at the Bender's bed and breakfast. The host would give the guest a seat of honor at the table, and that was postponed over the trap door in the cellar. Oh wow, they had that planned. When the victims backed into the curtain, Kate would distract the guests while John Bender or his son came from behind the curtain, stuck the guest in the right side of the skull with a hammer. One of the women would cut the victim's throat to ensure death, and the body was then dropped through the trap door. Once the cellar, the body would be stripped and later buried somewhere on the property, often in the orchard. Although some of the victims were wealthy, others carried little of value. and in the sermon of the Benders had killed them simply for the sheer thrill. Testimony from people who stayed at the Benders Inn and managed to escape before they could be killed appeared to support the proposition of execution method of the Benders. So they wanted to kill them. William Pickering said that when he refused to sit near the wagon cloth because of the stains on it, Kate Bender had threatened him with a knife, and whereupon he fled the premises. A Catholic police claimed that to have seen one of the Bender's men concealing a large hammer, at which point he became uncomfortable and quickly departed. The two men had who had traveled in the to the inn to experience Kate Bender's psychic powers stayed for the dinner but refused to sit at the table next to the cloth, instead preferring to eat their meal on the main shop counter. Kate then became abusive towards them, and shortly afterwards, the Bender men emerged from behind the cloth. At this point, the customers fled uneasy and decided to leave, a move that almost certainly saved their lives. More than a dozen bullet holes were found in the floor and sides of the cabin. The media speculated that some of the victims had attempted to fight back after being hit with the hammer. Wow, that's weird. Okay. Detectives following the wagon tracks discovered the Benders' wagon abandoned with a starving team of horses, with one of the mares lame and just outside the semi-limits of Danner. I'm sorry, I have the
There.
Thayer. And Thayer is a city in Neosho County, Kansas, and it's a small group. North of the inn, it was confirmed that the family bought tickets onto the Leavenworth, Lawrence, and Gravestone Galveston Railroad for Humboldt. At Chanute, John Jr. and Kate left the train and caught an MKT train south to the Red River County near Denison, Texas. Where is Denison, Texas? Oh, it's on the Texas-Oklahoma border. Okay. Just curiosity. From there, they traveled to the outlaw county throughout to be in the border regions between Texas and New Mexico. There was they were not pursued as lawmen followed outlaws into the region, often never returned. Unless they had Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves would have done it. Bass Reeves was a badass back then. One detective later claimed that he had traced the pair to the border where he had found John Jr. had died of asphyxiation. The elder Benders did not leave the train at Humboldt, but instead continued north of Kansas City, where it was believed that they purchased tickets for St. Louis, Missouri. Several vigilantes were formed, and back then vigilantes were mob tactics. That back then it was very, very. I don't know if it was like proud to do that, but anyways, vigilantes were formed in for the Benders. Many stories say that one vigilante group caught the Benders and shot all of them but Kate, whom they buried alive. Other groups claimed that they had caught the Benders and lynched them before throwing their bodies into the Vergrass River. Yet another claimed that they had killed the Benders during a gunfight and buried the bodies on the prairie. No one ever claimed the $3,000 reward, which at that time would be at nowadays time it would be $73,283. The story of Bender's escape spread, and the search continued on and off for the next 50 years. Often two women traveled together, were accused of being Kate Bender and her mother. Sorry. Drink break. In 1884, it was reported that John Flicker had committed suicide in Lake Michigan. Also in 1884, an elderly man matching John Bender's sinister description was arrested in Montana. for a crime committed near Salem, Idaho. God, those two states mess up my head. Where the victim had been killed by a hammer blow to the head. A massive request positive indications was sent to Cherryville, but the suspect severed his foot to escape in his leg irons and bled to death. By the time the deputy of Cherryville arrived, the identification was impossible due to decomposition. Oh, God. Despite the lack of identification, the man's skull was displayed as that of Paul Bender. And a Salem saloon upon Prohibition forced its closure in 1920, and the skull disappeared. Whether John Flicker was John Bender is unknown. See if we got any arrests. Several weeks after the discovery of the bodies, Arson Roach and his son-in-law, William Buxton, were arrested as associates, in total of 12 men of bad repute in general. I love that word, repute. That were bad repute. Would be arrested, including Brockman. All have been involved in disposing the victims' stolen goods, and with Mitt Cherry, the member of the Vigilance Committee, implied for forging a letter from one of the victims informing the man's wife that he had arrived safely at his destination in Illinois. Brockman would be arrested again 23 years later for rape and murder of an 18-year-old girl. They released him? And it doesn't say in the article that he was ever released. It just says they were arrested, so I guess he was released. On October 31st, 1889, it was reported that Miss Mara Monroe and Mrs. Sarah Elza Davis had been arrested in Niles, Michigan, often misreported as Detroit, several weeks over for larceny. They were released after being found not guilty, but were immediately rearrested for the Bender murders, according to Pittsburgh Dispatch, the daughter of one of the Bender's victims. Mrs. France McCann, had reported the pair to authorities in early October after tracking them down. Mrs. McCann's story came from the dreams about her father's murder, which she discussed. Wait a minute. The story came from dreams about her father's murderer, which she discussed with Sarah Elza. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh my, oh my God. Sorry. Reading it and trying to understand it at the same time is fucking hilarious. She had a dream about her father's murderer and discussed it with Sarah Ellis, and then the identity of the two Ostage Township witnesses tintype photograph. In the middle of October, Deputy Sheriff Leroy Dix, the Ostage Township trustee, was headed the search of Bender's property, arrived in Michigan and arrested the couple on October 30th following the release on the larceny charges. Miss Monroe resisted, declared that she would not be taken alive, but was subdued by local deputies. Okay, wow. I'm trying to understand the whole. Okay, I've been rereading this. McCann's story came from dreams about her father's murder. So okay, let me reread this whole damn thing. Mrs. Frances E. McCann had reported the pair to authorities in early October after tracking them down. Okay. But the reason why she tracked them down was because she had a dream about her father's murder. Gee, wow. Okay. She literally tracked these people down because she had a dream about it. I'm not saying she's wrong, but I'm also saying that women have fucked up dreams and they go with it. Mrs. Davis claimed that Miss Monroe was Elvira Bender, but she was not Kate. But after her sister Sarah, she later signed an affidavit to the effect, while Monroe continued to deny the identification and in turn accused Sarah Elza of being the real Kate Bender. Wow, this is so fucking confusing. If you're listening to this and you're confused, I'm with you. Deputy Sheriff Dick, along with Mrs. McCann, escorted the pair to Okoa, Kansas, where 7 members of 13-member panel confirmed the identification and committed them to trial. Another of Miss Morrow's daughters, Mary Grindle, later proved an affidavit claiming that her mother, then Amira Shear, under the name of Amira Marks, was serving 2 years in Detroit House of Corrections in 1872 for the manslaughter of her daughter-in-law. God, 2 years? She was serving 2 years for murder. God, back then, that was fucking awesome. You murder somebody and just get 2 years. Now they give you like 20 and get you off the fucking streets. Sorry, I'm amazed of how you murder somebody, get 2 years, or they hang you. But they serve 2 years. Whereas back then, probably the living conditions of a jail would probably have been really horrible. Records of the incarcerations back up this affidavit. At her hearing, Miss Monroe denied any knowledge of Shear or the manslaughter charges and remained incarcerated with her daughter. Okay. Originally scheduled for February 1890, the trial was held over to May of 1890. Miss Monroe now admitted she was married to a Mr. Shear in 1872 and claimed that she was previously denied. Oh, she claimed this and they denied it. As she did not want the court to know that her name was Shear at the time and that she had a conviction of manslaughter. Okay, she hid her identity because she was a killer, but they didn't. Man, this is so confusing. Their attorney was produced a marriage certificate indicting Mrs. Davis as been married in Michigan, 1872, which proves her innocent of the Bender's crimes. Okay, that makes sense. The time when several of the murders were committed, eyewitness testimony was given that Mrs. Monroe was Elvira Bender. Judge Clive dismisses Miss Mary Grindle's affidavit as she was a chip off the old block. He found that other affidavits supporting Grindle's were sufficient proof that the woman could not have been convicted, and he discharged them both. Okay, so he believed that she wasn't Elvira Bender. The affidavits and other papers were also missing from the file in Labette County. So far, examinations of this impossible. Several researchers questioned the ready acceptance of the affidavit's authentication, and such that the county was unwilling to accept the expense of boarding 2 women for extended periods of time. When the 2 women were certain criminals and liars, as their defense attorney admitted, the charges were weak and many people doubted the identification of the Benders. So they got away with it. I don't know if they were actually connection with the Kelly family. And this is just hearsay on the rest of this stuff. Okay, here we go. Search of the cabin resulted in the recovery of 3 hammers, a shoe hammer, claw hammer, and a sledgehammer that appeared had to match the identifications in some of the skulls, indications, the holes in the head. These hammers have been given to the Bender Museum in 1967 by the son of Leroy Dix, the Osage Township trustee who headed the search for the Bender property. The hammers were displayed at the Bender Museum in Clareville, Kansas, from 1967 to 1978, where the site was acquired for the fire station. When attempts were made to relocate the museum, became a point of conversation. Some locals object to the town being known for the Benders murders. The Bender artifacts were eventually given to the Cherryville Museum, where they remain in a Wong-mounted display case. A knife with a 4-inch tapered blade was reported found hidden in the metal mantle clock in the Bender's house by Conrad York. In 1923, it was donated to the Kansas Museum of History by the York's wife, but not on display. Still bearing reddish brown stains on the blade, it could be seen upon request. So they have it at the museum, but you have to ask for it to take a look at it. Wow, that is okay. Other than the last part, trying to figure out if they let me see if I can find anything else on that, because that last part was confusing because I don't think they were found. Never caught. Okay, so they were never caught, and they have like a little sketch of the Benders. Kate was kind of cute. Not gonna lie, from the like sketch drawing, she was kind of cute. Let me see if I can find any images of this. No, it's just all sketch drawings from the script. Huh. Guess I had a photo of her. And it's barely noticeable. It's not attractive. I'd probably ended up dating her. She'd try to kill me. But yeah, that was Bloody Benders. Never caught. Again, thank you all for listening and watching on this occasion. And hopefully the last part didn't like confuse you as much as it confused the whole hell out of me. Going back and anytime you're going back and forth, and trying to figure out catching the right people. Back then they didn't have like photos or fingerprints, DNA. So it's very hard to figure out if they were the right person or not. I mean, most of the cowboy movies, they literally had like people. What was it? Hell, it was Magnificent Seven, Django, and a lot of others. That the people would actually be in a different part of the United States under another name because you just change your name like a hat. You don't have like social security cards, IDs, anything to back it up. So it was very easy to kill somebody, go somewhere else, and just disappear. But that's it, everybody. Love you guys. Talk to y'all later. Goodbye.